There are Hindus, but there is no such thing as Hinduism. The task of Hindutva, please mark my words, is to globalize the righting of historical wrongs. We wanted Hindus to be the fall guy. I am not prepared for that. Our tradition is tenacity, no? Otherwise it would have disappeared.
Namaste Sarvebhyaha. Namaste Dr. Sharma. My name is Rishi. Today we have with us Padma Shri Dr. Arvind Sharma, the Birks Professor of Comparative Religions at McGill University. Dr. Sharma is an incredibly accomplished scholar in the field of religious studies. He began his career in the highly competitive Indian civil services before transitioning into academia, where he eventually moved from economics into the sphere of religious studies. And from the 1970s onwards, he's been publishing and working in this field to much acclaim. We are very honored to have you here today, Dr. Sharma.
It's a privilege for me to be interviewed, yes.
Thank you. The purpose of our conversation today is to discuss certain salient aspects of Hinduism that are of much relevance to Hindus of bygone generations and my own. And keeping with that, I would like to present you with a few questions.
Please, yes.
To start with, you've defined Hinduism as the sum total of the beliefs and practices of Hindus. Today, however, many communities reject the Hindu label. So what really makes one Hindu? And does your definition risk making it too lax?
Right. Yeah, if you examine your question closely, it really contains four questions. Four issues, rather. The first of them is, as you mentioned, let me see if I have got it right, that I define Hinduism as a sum total of the beliefs and practices of Hindus. So why do I do that? Many attempts have been made to define Hinduism, and they have been largely unsuccessful in not just my view, but in the view of many scholars, because they always seem to leave something out or include what should not be there. And I think the reason for that is that we go about it a slightly wrong way. The basic point to recognize here is that in Hinduism, the people come first, as I see it. And Hinduism is the sum total of their beliefs and practices. Whereas in the case of most other religions, the creedal formulation and the prescribed behavior, that comes first. And those who accept them constitute the people, the followers of that religion. So there, the creed comes first and people follow. The teachings and practices precede the formation of the followers. Hinduism is the other way around. People come first, and their beliefs and practices, sum total, is Hinduism. Now, why does one say that? It is because it is easier to define a Hindu than to define Hinduism. Perhaps I should rephrase that. It is easier to identify a Hindu than to define Hinduism. For instance, if you are an Indian citizen, you can be defined, or rather the Hindu population of that country can be defined as those, again I should rephrase it, Hindus in that country can be identified as those who are not Christian, Muslim, Zoroastrian, or Jew. So, if you are an Indian citizen, the presumption is that you are a Hindu unless you belong to these categories. and then the sum total of their beliefs and practices is Hinduism. If you are not an Indian citizen, then the assumption is that you are not a Hindu. Just as the assumption was that you are a Hindu, if you are an Indian because it's the religion of the majority. In this latter case, you have to claim to be a Hindu in order to be accepted as one. You are presumed not to be one. Now this may appear a bit artificial, but this is more or less how a Hindu has been defined in the Hindu Marriage Act. After all, the government had to decide to whom does this act apply. So they had to define a Hindu. And this is how it was defined, more or less, consisting of two categories: Indian citizen, non-Indian citizen. And we have unpacked that earlier. And this fact has been recognized by many scholars and has led to puzzling and paradoxical statements which make perfect sense if we accept the idea that people come first and their beliefs and practices come later. For instance, a very well-known Canadian scholar of religion, Professor Wilfred Cantwell Smith, is known to have said, there are Hindus, but there is no such thing as Hinduism. Because there are people who identify themselves as Hindus, but there is no set of doctrines and practices which is accepted by all. Something may be common, or rather in the sense of being pervasive, but it is not exhaustive. So some Hindus may believe in the Vedas, most may, some may not. Believe in God, some may not. Karma, some may not. Okay. Now this distinction between when people come first and beliefs and practices come first can be traced back to sociology of religion. And there, I believe it was a German scholar who made the point of how one might distinguish between indigenous religions and religions like Christianity and Islam, or religions of a book. And he made this point that in the case of primal religions, the people come first. The tribal group comes first, and its beliefs and practices are the religion of that group. Whereas in the case of, most prominently in the case of Islam and Christianity, the belief comes first, belief and practice, and then those who follow them become. So we can draw upon that distinction to shed some light on the manner in which one might choose to define Hinduism, which has both now a legal and an academic backing. So this is for the first question, first part of the question. The second part was said about communities who reject the label Hindu altogether. Now this also pertains especially to India, because we find an asymmetry between some religions of Indian origin and Hinduism, which is also a religion of Indian origin. And the asymmetry is that Hindus might regard themselves as Hindus, but they don't regard themselves as Hindus. So this is especially true of the Sikhs in recent times, and also of Ambedkarite Buddhists, I think, and so on. So some people may regard themselves as, and it is up to them. But you can't force the category of Hindu on them. Actually, this is the criticism of the Indian Constitution by some communities in India, that they have been forcibly lumped with the Hindus, like the Buddhists, now some Buddhists, and more vociferously Sikhs. The Jains have not been very articulate in, if they have this sentiment, in expressing it. So this is the point about people not... Now this leads to a greater point, rather a larger point, that Hinduism allows for what you might call dual religious identity, or even multiple religious identity. But many of the religions which hesitate to be included as Hindus do not wish to have their identity compromised. They believe in exclusive religious identity. And this is a very important point, because Hinduism has been known right from the beginning for allowing multiple religious identity, or a dual certainly. And this actually was the case even in India in pre-British times. It is largely as a result of the census operations of the British that the idea of exclusive religious identity came to be associated with the term religion. We have very interesting instances of surveyors in the field writing to their superintendents that these groups of people regard themselves as both Hindu and Muslim. I'm even going beyond the indigenous religious tradition and including religions of foreign origin. And what should we do? And the superintendent said, use your discretion and classify them as one, either Hindu or Muslim. So that surveys, censuses, instead of reflecting reality, even began to shape it. And what we are seeing now is partly the result of this process. This urge on the part of some communities to say that we are not Hindus. Now, just to buttress this point, if you step beyond the border of India into Nepal, and you ask a Nepali, and what I'm saying, I'm repeating the findings of many anthropologists, and ask them, are you Hindu? They will say yes. And if you ask them, are you a Buddhist? They will say yes. Without any sense of contradiction or having a problem with this kind of dual identity. So that explains our second question and how to face it. The next question was, your definition, I said 4, but I can see 3 now. Okay. Does a definition risk making it too open-minded? Almost anything comes and goes. Yeah. Hinduism is open-minded. Hinduism has been compared to a field rather than a fence. A fence partitions land very clearly into 2 parts which are separate. But a field merges into other fields. If you walk from one field to another, the exact point where one field becomes another is usually hazy, is undemarcated. And Hinduism is is a religion of that kind, which is a field rather than a fence, represents a field rather than a fence. It can always be open to the charge that it is too open. But it's very telling that in India, if somebody says that I am both a Hindu and a Muslim, Hindus don't have much trouble with that. Though the political climate in India now may be a bit different. Let's take another example. If a Christian says, I am both a Christian and a Hindu, the Hindu does not have a problem with that. Christians have a problem. Christianity has a problem with that, not Hinduism. Okay, so your rich devta is Christ. So this is a part of the openness. And that is, of course, the very nature of Hinduism, which is clear from what we have just said. Once you belong to the Hindu community, and that's really ultimately a self-statement. It has to be a subjective claim. I am a Hindu. If you reject that, that's up to you. Then you are not a part of the community. Whatever your views about divinity and all, if you claim to be and can be established as a member of the community. Now here we get a bit nebulous, but often it has been said that if you practice any of the many rites and share any of the many beliefs of Hinduism, you can be accepted as a Hindu. Now, this is an important point to make because it is often ignored. The Manusmriti, and I like to refer to the Manusmriti here because the text has been usually considered as ultra-orthodox, narrow, and what else?
Regressive.
Regressive, uncharitable, and so on. So, in one of the chapters of the Manusmriti, it might be the second or third chapter. Towards the end of that, there is a statement, Shraddhadhana, person of faith, Shubham Vidyam, Adadit Avaradapi. Even from a low-born person, one should accept Shubha Vidya. Antyadapi Param Dharmam. Even the supreme teaching from an untouchable. Istri Ratnam Dushkuladapi. A woman even from a bad family. Vishada Pumritam Gayam. Baladapi Subhashitam. विष्णु से भी अमृत निकालो. बालक अगर अच्छी बात कहे तो उसको स्वीकार करो. अमृताद अपि सदमृतम. दुश्मन का भी अगर कोई व्यवहार जो है वो प्रशंसनीय है तो उसका अनुसरण करो. अमेध्यात अपि कांचनम. धूल से सोना निकालो, छानो. स्त्री रत्नान यहो विद्या धर्मः शौचम सुभाषितम विविधानि च शिल्पानि समादेयानि सर्वतः. तो उसमें धर्म भी है, शौच, रूल्स ऑफ प्रॉपर हाइजीन, विद्या. A man of faith, Shraddhadhana. So even a text like the Manusmriti could not escape this Catholic reach of Hinduism.
That leads us quite smoothly into our next topic with the discussion of the imposition of foreign or outsider terms into Hinduism. So, with regards to terms such as religion or God, should Hindus utilize them? And how might we as Hindus recontextualize them? Or should we use alternatives?
I think this is largely a matter of linguistic convenience. Now, ideally, perhaps we should use our own terms. But there are some complicating considerations. One of them is that English is being used by Hindus themselves for intra-religious communication within themselves. This is, of course, largely a result of the fact that English was introduced as a medium of education by the British in 1835. And, of course, periodically sentiment has been expressed that we should do something to undo the outcome of that decision and replace it and the issues will be discussed. But as Norman Hine, in an article several years ago, in an entry in a book, pointed out that English is being used in inter-regional communication among Hindus a lot. So a person from Tamil Nadu, especially if he belongs to the DMK, but still is a Hindu, so how will you converse with him? Unless you do it in Sanskrit, but you never know. The person knows it or not. Now, it's not too far-fetched an example. Actually, the well-known historian, Professor Romila Thapar, was both, what should we say, praised and criticized. Yeah, but I think most of us will accept her as a professional historian. And she recalls that she went to Kerala and went to a temple, and she did not know Malayalam, and he did not know either English or Hindi, and they talked in Sanskrit. So it's a default language in many ways. So we should not dismiss that prospect. But nevertheless, the point is that if our intra-religious communication is going to use English in the foreseeable future in a major way, then we may have no option but to use, we probably have the option, but there may be no easy recourse than using the English words. And so perhaps the proper response to the question would be that we should use them with care, with caution. But this is important. The question is important because the use of the word dharma for religion has had the effect of narrowing the meaning of the word dharma in some circles within India. Because the Western concept of religion involves the concept of exclusive religious identity, or at least that's the prototypical meaning of the word religion. If the word is used for Christianity or Islam or Judaism, you will surely recognize that even though Judaism, Christianity and Islam all believe in the same, in the one God and presumably the same God, yet you can't be a Jew, a Christian and a Muslim at the same time. Right? So it's such a strong exclusive association with the word religion. So if you use it in that sense in India, in Hindu discourse, you will really be narrowing the connotation of the word. So one has to be very careful about this. So with an awareness of the dangers, it's very important, however, this point is very important because we will notice that the first generation of English-speaking Indians does not fall in this trap because they are so rooted in their own traditions that when they use the English word, they know that we are using it for them. But the second generation, which becomes more deeply, which is more deeply into English language education, tends to forget this and tends to then understand the word in its Western sense, and forgets that it's a substitute for the original word.
From metaphor to amnesia, as you put it.
Yes. Exactly. So the point should be, of course, there is now a movement even to insist that we use, especially in sensitive contexts, we use the Hindu word. So people have been drawing up list of non-translatables. I think Rajiv Malhotra has done a lot of work on that, along with others. So I think that's a good point. That keeps us alert. If you have this, we build this pressure that we should use our own words. But we may find ourselves in a situation in which willy-nilly we may have to use English words or European words. And if we use them, then we should be aware of the danger.
Yes.
That's my take on it.
Thank you, Doctor. To move on to a topic of some more sensitivity, many sampradāyas often link Hinduism explicitly with jati. So, should we reject such a view? If not, should we incorporate it, and how might we do so?
You see, the predisposition in Hinduism is not to reject views. Entertain the view. There's a very important point here. You see, Hinduism is not like a textbook. It's like an encyclopedia.
I see.
And so an encyclopedia is precisely an encyclopedia because it has the opposite point of view. If you have a textbook on theism, you won't find it depends on whether you do philosophy of religion or not, but if you're doing theology, you won't find a discussion of reasons for not believing in God, unless you are going into philosophy. But in an encyclopedia, you will find one column where you give the reasons for believing in God, others for not believing in God. Reasons for being agnostic, reasons for being atheistic, reasons for being theistic. So if we recognize Hinduism that comprehensive nature, it must include its negation. Because that alone ensures that you have all the options in front of you. Hinduism is a religion of all options. So one should certainly entertain them. Now, to what extent now can we accept it? To tolerate doesn't mean to accept necessarily, you know. What is tolerate? Toleration is that you accept the other person's right to the other person's point of view as symmetrical with your own. Just as it is your right to believe what you believe, think what you think, feel what you feel, so does the other person. So how can you reject it, especially if you believe, if it's a community, Hindu community which you are going to cherish? You may challenge the person and all that, but you can't exclude the person. Unless the person wants to not be a part of that conversation. That's different. So once we have that attitude, we have to accept that. Now, to include it in our discussion. Now, to what extent can we accept it? So in this case, we'll have to point out that Hinduism's self-description in certain contexts is varna-ashram dharma. And the context is significant. All religions of Indian origin can be called dharma. And they actually call themselves also dharma, various places. So then how does Hinduism distinguish itself from Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism? By calling itself varna-ashram dharma, in which that form of the Indic tradition for which the concepts of varna and ashrama are constitutive, diagnostic features of the tradition. But it does not call itself jati, ashram dharma, varna-ashram dharma. So we have to keep that in mind. It is true that sometimes jatis and sampradāyas have been, but it is also true that many sampradāyas occur across jatis. So I think everybody has the right to believe in their form of Hinduism, so long as they don't stop others from practicing their form of Hinduism.
Yes.
But this has a remarkable extension in India. Abbé Dubois was an 18th century French
Missionary.
Missionary, but pilgrim missionary. And he toured India, especially South India. And it's a well-known account, obviously you are familiar with it. So Abbé Dubois says, he uses a strange thing in India, that husbands and wives may belong to different sampradāyas and may have their own religious routine. But he says, I've never been known a case in which the husband will interfere or try to change the practice of the wife. It is considered something private. That person's religiosity, you don't tamper with that. And same with the wife and husband and wife. Okay, so this is one point about. And this leads to other points that one can regard oneself as believing in jati and sampradāya closely linked, not linked at all, or linked in various other ways. I think you once, while we were discussing this earlier, you raised the question of whether there can be Hinduism without caste.
Yes.
That's a very important question in our present context, which is to be answered in the same spirit. Some may regard it as an essential feature, some may not. But as an observer of the tradition, you have to note that there are vast sections, or not sections actually, there are vast spans of time within its broad history, periods you might say, when caste was not a main feature, an important feature of Hinduism. Okay, let's look at it this way. The first clear articulation of the varnas is found in the Purush Sukta, which is in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, which along with the first is supposed to be late. So if you place the Vedas around 1500 BCE, of course this is open to serious question, but let's accept it for the time. So you have 1500, and this will then be placed around 1000 or 1200 BCE, the later parts. So what was happening in Hinduism for those 300 years? It was without caste. By the way, the word varna is not mentioned in the Purush Sukta. The varnas are. The word varna is not. It's, I think, later on in Brahmana or Aitreya somewhere. Well, it's a minor point, but an interesting point. If we become too fussy about use of words. So there is, okay. Then general consensus, at least among the scholars I have read, that the caste system crystallized gradually. So whatever the time you take for its actual crystallization as you read it, and there can be many views on this, but the point which is certain is that there was a period when it was not crystallized. So it did not exist as a caste system. So whether Hindu or not. Or were they Vedic or not. Whether Sanatan or not. Then, in modern times, you will find people claiming that they have no caste. So what I am trying to argue is that if you test this proposition, both in the temporal and spatial dimension, whether caste is an integral part of Hinduism, then you find that there are exceptions, serious enough exceptions for us to say that it is a pervasive but not an integral part of the tradition. So we had this historical period, and we have the modern period when you might have groups which insist that they are not following caste at all, they are casteless. Okay. So this is in terms of time. Of course, there are groups in Hinduism which have claimed that there is no caste in them, the Mahanubhava and so on. So what will happen to them also? Okay. The other is spatial. Hinduism is not prevalent only in India. What about Bali? Bali, there is no untouchability. So those who regard untouchability as in several parts of varna system, they get into big trouble there. Then Mauritius, a very well-known scholar in our field, Lipner. He taught at Cambridge. He has a very nice book on Hinduism. He uses this example. Mauritius is not. Those communities which went out from India, from various castes, they are now marrying all across the board. I went to Fiji. All Hindus there marry among themselves, whatever their varna or jati. So if it was an integral feature, essential feature, then it should have survived this transition. So both in terms of time and dimensions of time and space, the generalization is hard to support. There is also a third consideration which is logical. Things may be pervasive but not essential.
Yes.
Can you think of something?
We can say that many Hindus speak a particular language, but one doesn't need to be speaking that language to be considered a Hindu.
Most Hindus speak Indian languages, but
Not all Hindus speak Indian languages. They're correlated, but they're not.
causally related. Yes. And the example I like to give is based on my American experience. Most Americans come from Europe, predominantly. Of course, there are the Native Americans, blacks. And so, all of them belong to some Christian domination. So, Christian denominational identification is pervasive in USA. But do you have to be a Christian to be a citizen of the USA?
No.
It's pervasive, but not essential. And then, final point on this. Identities, the norms of identities can shift. The identity remains the same, but the norm shifts. The same American Constitution allowed slavery. It was a part of your identity, American identity. After it was abolished, now not having slavery is a part of your identity. You could have easily argued that slavery is an essential part of being American. Maybe many probably even believed it. Mm-hmm. Those who fought in the Civil War maybe not believed it. But the belief was mistaken. This point is important because people don't realize this. The Manusmriti itself provides for the abolition of caste. There is a verse, I think, in the 4th chapter, which I will try to recall, though perhaps inexactly, but not wrongly. Parityajed artha kamo vyahu syatam dharma varjito. Give up that earth and calm, pursuit of that earth and calm, which is devoid of dharma. Dharmam api. Next line. Asukhodarkam, which does not produce positive results in the long run. Loka vikrushtamevacha, and is denounced by the people. So the greatest claim to following varna or jati is that it is dharma. Veda khilo dharma moolam. Rooted in Veda also, if you want to claim that way, your dharma. But the same Manusmriti also says, you can give it up. This is not inconsistent. The two or few places where the Manusmriti specifically refers to the Purush Sukta, it has a clause which is not there in the Purush Sukta. In one case it says, Sargasya tu guptyartham, to protect this created universe. Other place it says, Lokanam tu vidyartham, for the progress of the people. The 4 divisions were created. So if you look at it carefully, the 4 divisions become capable of being assessed in the light of the clause explaining why they were introduced. If they don't fulfill that prior condition, which was the reason for introducing, what do you do with them?
You discard them.
Discard them. So if we keep this perspective with us, that the Hindu religious tradition is plural and dynamic, then we will be able to avoid falling in the trap, of exclusive predication. In various parts of it, when there is a certain elasticity within the tradition about those issues. The point can be pressed further, though it becomes a bit uncomfortable, because if you ask the question, if you have to choose between truth and Hinduism, what will you choose? As a Hindu.
As a Hindu, one must choose truth because that's what Hinduism chooses.
Satya dharmaya drishtaya.
Yes. Coming to a point that is related to your contemporary work, you've recently written a book, Hindutva for Our Times, in which you've deliberated on Savarkarite and Hindutva thought quite deeply. Given your engagement with that side of theory, where do you position yourself with regard to Hindutva? As a critic, as a sympathizer, as an interpreter, or as something else?
Yeah, as a critic, as an interpreter, as a sympathizer, or something else. Okay. So, as a critic, I think in all of these capacities. Let me start with the one in which I sympathize first. As a sympathizer in the sense, yes, I am a sympathizer in in the following sense. I ask myself the question, what is the greatest failure of the Hindu religious tradition? I once asked this question in a gathering where I was delivering those lectures. There were about 40 people in the audience. Everybody said something social, economic, theological, and so on. Only 2 people said political. So you realize then that the majority of Hindus don't regard the political failure of Hinduism, by which I mean the fact that Hindus as a community has been largely under foreign subjugation from about, certainly from about 1200 onwards, if not earlier. Yeah? Now, it is the conclusion I have arrived on my own, that this is Hinduism's greatest failure. It's political and military. And so, this is the only strand in Hindu thought, as I receive it, which seems consistent with that, which has anticipated this. I do believe it may have many failures, but for me, I would regard all other failures as related to this in some way or the other. And certainly, for me, it is the greatest failure of the Hindu religious tradition. It's political. And to the extent that this strand within Hinduism is on the same wavelength, though we may have some differences about how we exactly interpret things, I am a sympathizer. After having been a sympathizer, when I explored that tradition within Hinduism, then I also become its critic and interpreter. Critic in those parts where I find that my personal view is, I really think that Savarkar, Veer Savarkar, summed it all up when he said, Hinduize politics and militarize Hinduism. Do you know where it has been tried successfully?
Where?
Sikhism.
Very arguably, yes. Yes. I agree.
It was a Pacific sect after Guru Arjan. And then, when I probe it further, I become a critic in the sense that some of the things which Savarkar said, it seemed to me did not gel with this conclusion of the political failure. For instance, his views on the cow. They're very similar to the views of Pandit Nehru. How is a cow more sacred than a horse? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Why do I say that? Why is the cow sacred? You tell me.
Well, we treat it as the mother. It provides us its milk selflessly. It's attested to in the Vedas and the other Shastras. And it is the source of subsistence in village life.
Very good. Very good. So, as I try to tell my class, in order to understand the cow, you have to understand the horse and the dog and the pig. So what is the parallel with the horse? In medieval Europe, I am told, horse meat was not eaten because horse was such an important element. The social and economic life of the community, as you explained. Since the fertilizer factory on 4 feet, all that. Okay. So that's one. Dog, it was a pet. There's a well-known documentary maker in India, Meera Diwan. And she was telling me that she once went to a village in South India and the whole family seemed depressed. She said, "What's wrong?" They said, "The calf is not well." So, how do you feel when your dog is not well? So, this is another reason why you have special feelings for that. Now, the point against my point, when I am criticizing Savarkar, he missed the pig part. He missed all this. He took an ultra-rational view of the animal kingdom. Because you have these recorded accounts, when a temple was broken, demolished and all that, to prevent Hindus from coming there again, they would slaughter a cow. There are many accounts of this. So the example I give to my classes, because I am in Canada, that suppose there was some, thanks to Trump, there was a fallout with the relations between. They came to loggerheads, America and Canada or something. And in order to spite the Canadians, the Americans started wiping their shoes with the Canadian flag. What will be your feelings for the Canadian flag now?
Indignation.
Are they now different from what they were before this happened?
Yes.
Yes. Now it has become charged with emotion. This is how the cow became charged with emotion, when it was used to insult you. So, this is how we have to understand this.
And the pig?
This is the pig. Islam. Encounter with Islam. So because he is very conscious of the encounter with Islam, he completely missed this point. I mean, they are great people and great thinkers and all. I'm just saying that this is how I felt when I read some of the things he has said. So that's the critic part. Interpreter, you have seen the lectures I gave on how I would interpret Hinduism. I would really emphasize the fact that this is our task now. The task of Hindutva is to globalize please mark my words, is to globalize the righting of historical wrongs. Hindutva thinking in India must take this very seriously, that Hindutva stands for the righting of historical wrongs. Now, why do I say that? Emphasize that. Human society evolved. At one point, theft would not be a crime. Everybody took away whatever they could, made off with whatever they could. Then the realization dawned that we'll be a happier, healthier society if we had private property. Rights were protected. So the stealing came in. And then you have laws against stealing. This marks a stage of moral progress. At one time, there were no war crimes. Oh, everything is fair in love and war. But then human sensitivity, moral sensitivity has evolved. Now we have a category of war crimes. Yes, we can have a war, but we won't have this. We don't have much to choose between slavery and genocide, I guess, from one point of view. But at one point, slavery was an improvement on genocide. Now, the introduction of law and order in a society, state formation, is a major step forward in human history. Right? Now, let us go back to the original context when this might have happened. So take a society in which if one person kills somebody in another family, the family is committed to revenge. Kill a person in the other family. It might even be with clans. What resulted from that? Especially in those days when wars were, people were fighting it out. The chaos of private revenge seeking. Part of the problems in Afghanistan are because they have not been able to get it totally out of this. As I understand it, I don't want to malign Afghanistan, but the impression one forms is that they still, and because of that, state formation is a certain. Anyway, hypothetically. Okay. So, some wise person in the society says, look, we should have law and order. The person who is guilty of murder should be brought to court. There should be trial, judgment, punishment. And he persuades some people. If somebody won't do this, we'll do that. Okay. So the case happens. And the person says, okay, I'm not going to kill the other guy. Let's go to court and all. And suppose the culprit runs away. The fellow will feel cheated. Will tell the wise man, what is this? I've been taken for a ride. I'm giving this a hypothetical possibility, dwelling on this hypothetical possibility to point out what a revolution this simple step was. Today, we are sitting in our home, somebody comes and shoots our children, and then we are able to overpower him. What will you do? Will you kill him or call the police? Tell me.
We've been conditioned to call the police.
We have been socialized.
Yes.
This has become almost a normal reaction. But see the depth of socialization involved. How primitive the instinct is. So this is the great step which humanity took. And there will be fall guys. This is the whole process. It's so tricky. But once communities could see that in that society they are not killing each other, they are doing well, they are better off than us, let's also try to see if we can follow it. So demonstration effect. So this is how it spread. I'm just speculating, but the point I'm trying to make is that our moral sensitivity, range of it gets extended, then these steps are introduced. Now at the moment the situation is that if a wrong is a historical wrong, we say, to ho gaya history mein. Why should we care? Right? But the Hindutva mode of thinking takes the India's past very seriously. It's even accused of being revengeful, right? Which I think is wrong. we should not confuse seeking justice with revenge.
Yes.
To seek revenge is to become unjust in the pursuit of justice.
Yes.
But that does not mean that you don't seek justice. So, it was years ago. So, as a scholar was recounting on a TV program, I think Nigel Bigger, he has tried to justify, he has tried to defend British Empire recently. Yeah? Very interesting series of lectures and conversations. So, some politicians from the Caribbean were arguing before a British diplomat that they should be compensated for slavery and all that, whatever the British did and all that. So the British diplomat listened to it all carefully and says in the end, yes, we will compensate you when we get our compensation from the Romans. Now, for me, this is dodging the issue. How is it dodging the issue? My stuff is stolen. I go to the police and say, so stuff is being stolen all the time. Do you think we are going to register every case? To argue for a special case which could be remedied through an established mechanism, because not all cases can be brought within its purview, is perverse. Or seems to me a bit perverse. Yeah? So the point I am trying to make is that what the Romans did, and they let the Romans and the British settle it. But what the British did as part of the empire with these Caribbean colonies is proximate, can be calculated to a certain extent. We have evidence, we have documents. The Mau rebellion, people have been compensated. So it is time to prevent dismissing the idea that historical wrong should be righted as too far-fetched, too quixotic. You could always use those arguments for all the progressive steps taken earlier by humanity. And Hindutva thinking in India should first seek, Hindus should seek proper compensation for what they have suffered historically. So there should be a righting of historical wrongs. Now people panic when this issue is brought up. So the point I would like to make is that, look, when we look at this whole thing, we have to realize that in some ways this may be a liability. In some ways it may also be an asset. Let's not panic. First, I would like to point out that we should distinguish between guilt and responsibility. Now we say, oh, I did not treat anybody as an untouchable. Why should I be involved in this accounting of debts and all brought about by this? And the point is, yes, but don't you feel responsible in a moral sense? Okay, but there is a system, and something has happened in the system, and if one can be of any help in rectifying it, why not? So one should not start feeling, the guilt. Guilt, responsibility are two different things. This is one thing. Second is, even in the terms of guilt, okay. So now we came to women's claim on men. So as men now we become a stand in we are in the dock, okay. But we are also Indians who were colonized. There we are in the asset side. Here we fall in the liability side. So it may all clear out in a large way. But we should not run away from it.
Yes.
See? We should face it rather than retiring from it or refusing to face it. And so this is how the Hindutva's message, which might be very specific for India, or rather the Hindu India, can be globalized. We should take an active part in wherever these claims are being made, in studying them, being part of them. We might invite all countries in the as a member of the Commonwealth. We might invite all countries in the Commonwealth to make their estimates of how much they have lost by virtue of being in the colony. Then there might be also an asset sheet from the empire side. These things should be faced. So that's the direction in which I would like, at the present level of my understanding of these things, I would like to see the discussion move.
So in that sense, by Hinduizing politics, we can turn it into a global liberation movement.
That is, what we are doing, in our case of Hindus in India, is one case of a larger issue.
Of correcting historical wrongs.
Historical wrongs, and the most recent historical wrong has been colonization, of which we have been a victim, and we have also been a victim of a previous colonization. So we are taking this head on, this whole issue. And there is a global message. Hindutva has a global message.
Thank you. And just springboarding off of that issue, you've done quite a bit of work in the Gandhian sphere of thought as well. So, briefly, do you think the Gandhian and the Savarkarite or the Hindutva modes of thought can be synthesized, and should they be?
Okay. So, Godse shot Gandhi. Nathuram Godse assassinated Mahatma Gandhi. Antithetical? Nothing could be more antithetical. Gandhian and Hindutva. But let's look at it closely. What did Gandhi stand for? A divided India or a united India?
United.
What did Godse stand for?
United.
He has even left his ashes to be immersed in the Indus River once the country is united. So you saw this divergence between Gandhi and Hindutva, and how do you deal with this convergence? Both wanted the same thing. Both gave their lives for the same thing. So your question is not irrelevant in this sense, it's profoundly relevant. And I think there's a scholar, Makarand Paranjpe. He has written a book on this.
Yes, Hind Swaraj and Hindutva.
Yeah. So this is one thing we have to keep this in mind. Now, what was Gandhi trying to achieve? We go back to, this is how I have been able to make sense of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. So we go back to our earlier discussion of progress, moral progress of humanity. And the recognition that developing a society which relied on law and order to achieve justice was a major step in the history of humanity. We agree with that?
Yes.
And do we agree that most modern nations, national societies, are based on that premise?
Yes.
Yeah? Whether we are in Canada or India or America or UK or Russia or China. So it's become universal. So it was a great step forward and is recognized always. I think what Mahatma Gandhi was trying to achieve without having articulated it like this is, can't we take the next step? What is the next step? When we are unable to resolve individual differences, at one time we fought it out. Then we realized, let's have law and order. We can still resolve them, but in different framework. And we have this great step forward. I think what Gandhi was trying to tell us, that just as we learn to resolve individual differences non-violently, can't societies and nations do this? Now, when you try to do this, someone may have to be the fall guy. That is why I said Hindus should allow themselves to be killed by the Muslims. The Muslims want to kill them. This is how it makes sense to me. At least the issue will be resolved non-violently, whichever way it is. And you see, once humanity recognizes the benefits from it, just as in the previous case, it went universal. Non-violence in this sense will go universal. I give you a concrete example, hypothetical but concrete. Germany and England fought it out, Second World War. At the end of that war, Germany was more badly off than before. England was more badly off than before, rationing, loss of empire. Would not both of them been better off if they had submitted to arbitration, international? Even if the judgment Germans felt has gone against us, or the British felt has gone against us, they would still be better off, both of them, for not having done it violently.
Yes.
And this is what he was trying to achieve. Okay. Now, he wanted Hindus to be the fall guy. I am not prepared for that.
I agree.
It's a very desirable goal. Global or universal, worldwide considerations are relevant. And there is no doubt in my mind that it would be a great leap forward. That is for Gandhi. My interest, my passion has not gone beyond our fate as Hindus. I can relate to it intellectually. Gandhi's had, he said openly, Indian independence is of no interest to me if it is not achieved through non-violence. He had become a citizen of the world. I am a citizen of India. Let there be a world government, then I will be a citizen of the world. Maybe if future India will be able to take the initiative and make a world government, yes, I am in sympathy with that. But India will have to come up on its own as among the powerful, economically and militarily powerful countries in the world, and play its proper role in the Committee of Nations. And it gets the opportunity to implement this world government thing, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam politically.
Yes.
It should play its role. I would prefer that route to the Gandhian self-sacrificial route. It was a great, can you imagine if, see, the point is, such a partition is such a tragedy, because if our independence had been achieved without partition, the whole world would have said, if Hindus and Muslims, with all this recent history, a long history, although history has many phases where there are very positive phases, if they can achieve this, why should the Jews and the Iranians and the Israelis have to fight it out? Or the Jews and the Muslims? This is what I'm saying, the demonstration effect. This is the tragedy of partition. For me, in a global context. And you see, the idea of multiple identity would have become so much in vogue, because if partition had not taken place and we had worked out a way of living together, if we had worked out the coexistence, Hindu-Muslim thing and all those differences, and then each one of us would have had three identities. We would have had three names: a Hindu name, a Muslim name, and a Western name. We would have been speaking both Sanskrit, Urdu, Persian or Arabic, and English, French or German or whatever. And this will be the future world.
The lost potential of partition.
So for me, yeah, I think we are being a bit counterfactual, but I think it's worth just taking it into account. So it was really a tragedy. It almost happened. One wonders whether partition could have been prevented. I've thought a lot about this. I think it could have been. If, when the partition scheme was announced, May or June, whenever, 47, Gandhi realized the danger, others did not, what might happen. If Gandhi had gone on a fast to death for Hindu-Muslim unity, not opposing Pakistan, no, because this question will still remain. There will be Hindus in Pakistan, Muslims in India, so I am fasting for ensuring Hindu-Muslim unity. Partition was impossible after that. That's my feeling.
Because he had that power at that time.
He had that. Why didn't he do it is something else. Because he really had the good of everyone in mind. I came to this realization when I learned of a suggestion he had made after partition had been accepted. He said the two dominions should have a common army. When I read that, I said, look, I have been studying this issue for 40 years. This idea didn't cross my mind. Look at the beauty of the idea. And if you have told the British government, look, this is our great achievement, the British Army, we can't allow it to be broken up. He could have even sold it to the British. They didn't, by then it had gone too far. But look at this, the far-reaching insight, and it can only come from sheer sincerity. for the good of both. Didn't come to me.
So, I guess we can come to a question which looks not on the past but on the future, Dr. Sharma. You've been studying Hinduism and religious studies for decades upon decades. You're deeply familiar with the subject matter. So, from a Hindu of the next generation to you, my question would be, what would you like to reshape about the study and also the practice of Sanatana Dharma, and why?
Well, you see, I'm hesitating because the conclusion is so hard to sell. I have no doubt about the conclusion. I have not the slightest doubt that if it's followed through, we will reach heights we have not reached before, historically. But that is what makes it so, in a sense, distressing, that it is so hard to even suggest something like that. And it pertains to both the study of Hinduism and our life as Hindus, future as Hindus. And that is the revival of Sanskrit as a living language. Fully, that is, fully as a language of science, technology, administration, whatever, along with other Indian languages. But as once I made a phone call to India, and the person at the other end started speaking, I think, in Hindi. So the telephone operator said to me, "Do you know Indian?" See? If I had been a German, Britisher, calling Germany, "Do you know German?" Somebody talks to the operator in German, she presumes that this presumption should work. One should be able to say, "Yes, I speak Indian." That is Sanskrit. So many problems we discussed and we have discussed and we will discuss are related to this in various degrees.
Yes.
I mean, the social discrimination and caste and equality and all. If a Sanskrit-speaking Dalit stands in line with a Brahman, who will get the respect? Non-Sanskrit speaking Brahman, who will get the respect?
The Dalit.
There goes your caste system. I have long wondered why Dr. Ambedkar wanted Sanskrit to be India's national language. I mean, basically, technically the language of the Union, but what would mean with Indian? This was a fantastic insight.
Yes.
And that it came to him. I mean, look at the vision. But then the other point to think about is like this. It took 1,000 years for us to achieve political independence. But look at what we have achieved in 70 odd years compared to the previous several centuries. I mean, I have no doubt in 2 or 3 generations, half of the problems will be wiped out with Sanskrit. So one starts thinking, in the spirit in which people fought for India's political independence? Should we not do something? Yeah. So I think that goes to the heart of the matter. The real solution to many problems is the revival of Sanskrit. It's a spoken language, regular, which it is basically. But just as it was not an easy task achieving political independence. But when it came, except for partition, when it came beyond the dreams of even Shivaji or Rana, Rana Pratap, Rana Sanga, Hariḥ and Bukka. They only thought of South India. Yeah.
Yes. Lachit Borpukhan, Guru Gobind Singh,
Yeah.
Lalitaditya.
Yeah. So, who knows? Yes. But we should certainly keep it going. Whether we can aspire to make it the national language may seem too much for us. But we should certainly keep the tradition alive. For in a sense, we keep talking about the continuity of our culture. But a key element in that continuity is the continuity of the Vedic recitation.
Yes.
Yeah? It's amazing, 3,000 years. That's
Unbroken.
I mean, to imagine that if we were transported into Vedic times, it would take us 2 weeks to get the lingo, the hang of how the words are being used, and we'll be talking to them in their own language. It's an amazing thought.
Indeed.
Or vice versa.
Yes.
संस्कृत का कुछ कैसे किया जाए? And it has to be politicized. It has to be the national. It must have the force of the state behind it. उसके बिना तो. Or how does one do it? There is actually no escape from entering politics. Point ये है ultimately.
Yeah.
All those who want to save Hinduism and India and all have to enter the rough and tumble of politics.
The dirty game.
Dirty game है, लेकिन उसमें जाए
Yeah. उसके बिना
नहीं होने वाला है. The thing about the Sanskrit is sometimes. Have you heard a famous statement by Margaret Mead?
I might have. Which statement?
Margaret Mead said that never doubt the ability of a handful of committed people to change the world. It is the only thing which has. When you are committed, as is a very nice statement by Nietzsche, if you have a why for your life, you don't worry about the how.
Yes. He who has a why needs no how.
Yeah, he who has a why needs no how.
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful.
तो ये है बस why हो गया तो फिर ठीक है जो भी है. It's a very powerful ये thought, ये हमारे tenacity. You mentioned tenacity. Our tradition is tenacity, no? Otherwise it would have disappeared. Because Sanskrit is without doubt the magic formula.
It is. From every angle.
If one has to focus on one thing, after all that we have discussed, any kind of practical thing, I have absolutely no doubt, having being a student of history and culture and everything, it will completely shake India up, wake it up. And the reaction in लोगों का. Have you seen some people whom you don't know, they discover you speaking in Sanskrit to somebody else? Have you had some experience?
Yes, doctor. Yeah.
How do the people react?
People are blown away.
Absolutely blown away. You can just see in that sense of wonder what's happening?
Mm-hmm. They marvel.
They marvel. And this, we have to, our people are worthy of our respect for this fact that they marvel.
Yes, indeed.
The average Indian, when he hears this, something happens to him.
The fact that they find it incredible is an indication that there is still hope, that there is still a future for that.
I feel the same way.
Well, evam sarvam muktva mama hridayat kevalam ekam vakyam asti yataham vaktum ishyami.
Kim?
Dhanyavadaha, sahasraha dhanyavadaha.
Upkartosmi.
Kritagnyosmi. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. I'm sure that this conversation will help many more people beyond just the two in this room, or at least beyond just me. I'm deeply grateful to you for having been able to have this conversation. And I hope that this is just the first of many more.
Thank you. Yeah. It was nice to have an opportunity to respond to those questions. We struggle with them. Yeah.
And it's been the honor not of one lifetime, but of many lifetimes.
Thank you very much for setting this up. Yeah.
My absolute pleasure.